All right, we're going to start. City Attorney, do we have anything to report out for our city council meeting?
No, there was no reportable action in closed session.
Okay, thank you. Called the meeting to order of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our statement of values. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we gather, we humbly seek blessings upon this meeting. May we act with strength, courage, and will to perform our obligations and duties to our people with justice to all. Let us seek wisdom so that we may act in the best interests of our people, our neighbors, and our country. All this we ask so we may serve our community with fairness and respect, putting their needs before all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call, clerk.
Authority Member Caserta. Here. Davis. Here. Kolstad. Here. Mahan. O'Neill.
Here.
Watanabe. Here. And Chairperson Gilmore.
Here. Is there a motion to excuse Authority Member Mahan? Second. Motion second. Lights on the motion. And that passes unanimously.
Mayor Gilmore, if I may
yes.
read the AB 23 announcement that members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting. Additionally, the Statement of Behavioral Standards. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that, as the presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed. Welcome, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk. Approval of minutes from August 24th. Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion second. Lights on the motion, and that passes unanimously. Any continuances or exceptions?
No.
Anyone? All right, seeing none. Public presentations. Are there any cards, Mr. Clerk? Any public presentations? Mr. Lane, if you'd like to come up, please come forward. Oh, you can just keep it. Thank you. Good evening.
Is it 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
Three. We got three.
Wonderful, thank you. Madam Mayor, City Council.
Our Stadium
City
Authority.
For now. Stadium Authority, sorry, I know which
We'll
hat you're wearing today, right?
Well, anyway, I'll get used to it.
Once again, I wanted to bring up what I brought up last time, which was I hoped at this meeting we would have agendized a curfew where if it's violated, there is something much higher. So since it is not on here, that means we cannot talk about it, have an action item, and come up with this. For the larger picture, what I've been saying for many months is I wish what we had is a citywide outreach committee, especially with the North Side folks, to come up and have them help lead the discussion to find out how many times do we want to have an event, what's it worth for them, how do you make it worthwhile for both the Stadium Authority and the city, the residents that have to put up with the stadium for literally 3 to 4 hours after curfew anyway. So my frustration is the fact that this is a larger trend that I realize that we want to be good partners with Levi Stadium Management Company, Stadco, Manco, and the 49ers. Corporations and companies and civic organizations and cities and counties often have conflicting interests, but they do find ways to find common ground. I do wish we can find common ground. I hope the new stadium manager comes in and you give him some staff to also look at what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and how we can improve. I do think that it is, of course, incumbent on any private entity to try to come up with the best deal possible, but it's also up to each government organization to draw boundaries, and if there's any pushback or negotiations, that we enter the strongest negotiations possible. I think, unfortunately, there's been about 20 years of history where that really hasn't been the case. So while the City Council and the Stadium Authority have been doing a yeoman's job of triaging what needs to work and work better and fine-tune, this is something that while cities never want to reopen up negotiations, you have been sued by an organization that is not willing to provide you with information. You have actually not gone with market rate for an 11-acre facility that literally, over the period of years, if you look at compounding interest, if you leave it without even coming up with taking money out, $5 million a year, you're not talking $300 million, you're talking upwards of $1 billion after 60 years. So we are leaving on the table, just for the 11-acre facility alone, enough money to solve probably at least the emergency services, pension, unfunded pension, perhaps even the city's overall, and even the medical pension, which the city still needs to release, which was $150 million for Palo Alto, a smaller city. So I do wish you came up with a curfew. If they go past the curfew again and thumb their nose once again at the Stadium Authority, what are you going to say? We've been trying to tell you for years to negotiate better with the 49ers, and frankly, y'all refuse to do it. So the residents are the one that pay the price.
Thank you. Vice Chair Caserta.
Stadium Director Botcher, my recollection was that a few weeks ago, we made a motion to actually have a meeting in the north side. That was the intent of me seconding that motion. Why has that not been scheduled?
Madam Chair, members of the board,
And if I'm wrong, please tell me.
after the August 24th meeting, the Stadium Authority Board, you had directed the executive director to schedule such meetings with the community. And one meeting had been scheduled immediately on September 6th. However, that did not work out because then we were also working with Councilmember Teresa O'Neill to develop the scope of such a meeting as to, who should be invited to the first meeting and so on and so forth. So I guess it was not fully vetted or baked at that point, so we had to cancel that meeting. Then tentatively, we had scheduled the second meeting on September 14th, but because of League's conference, League of Cities conference, there was a conflict with several board members. So that meeting also didn't work out. In the meantime, the stadium manager had written a letter to the city, and I responded to that currently the curfew has not been extended, and it will be discussed by the city council, and they need to abide by all the rules which are in place, and that's been agendized or will be agendized for the council meeting on the 26th.
So again, when are we having a meeting in the north side?
None has been scheduled at this time, so first discussion will be at the council meeting on the 26th to look at the options.
Okay, so I'm confused again. If it was clearly the intent of us to have a meeting, why are we having it re-agendized? Why don't we just have our staff find a date that works for all of us like we do in normal day business?
I mean, I shared with you staff's response that we had scheduled a meeting on September 6th, but because the agenda or the scope of the meeting was not fully developed, so we had to last minute cancel the meeting.
I don't understand what you mean by the scope of the meeting has not been developed, and how is that in the purview of one stadium authority member? I don't understand. I don't understand what you mean by scope of the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, staff's intent was, and that's how we took the direction, that we will just engage the community, we'll advertise it, whoever shows up. Staff will just take their comments and then bring it back to the city council, because the curfew comes under the city council, to start talking about, what concessions the residents may want in order to allow 2 or 3 weekday concerts to
I
continue.
appreciate that, and I'm glad it's coming about on the 26th, but I felt it was pretty crystal clear that our job was to get in front of those residents because the last meeting that we had elongated and there was very few of them there for whatever reason. I just would like us all to get in front of that community at a site that's comfortable there, and I thought it was pretty clear as day, so I'm a little perplexed and disappointed. Thank you.
Okay?
Authority Member O'Neill. You can
Yes,
shed some light on this.
thank you. So let me just explain. So when I made the motion, I talked about having a, meaningful or, community outreach plan or whatever. So after I did that, the city manager reached out to me a couple days later and said, what do you mean by an outreach plan? And so I did submit a couple weeks ago an outline of what could be an outreach plan. So I think that that's what the city manager is suggesting that be discussed. So that's all I can, he reached out to me, I sent something back, and
I haven't seen that, I mean, I appreciate that, Authority Member O'Neill. I mean, we should all get that letter.
so,
I don't think
yeah,
I've
so
gotten
he
it.
just asked me, so I sent it back to him, since he communicated to me, I sent it to him.
I mean,
It was just a suggestion, he just asked me what I meant, so.
okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think part of the issue was that meetings were set, but authority members could not attend. And if you're going to really have some meaningful input from our north side residents, we have to have it fully advertised, fully, spread out to the community in different ways to get some real meaningful information. But I know the executive director was trying to do something pretty quickly because of the short timeline, but this board needs to be involved in the outreach process, because we're the ones that make the decision on it. So it's, we should get the input. And I know Authority Member O'Neill did submit something that will be before us, I hope soon, so we can all look at it and talk about how we're going to do that. So any other public comment? Please come forward. Ms. Brass? Good evening.
Mark your calendar. Dominic Caserta and I once again agree. We've got 2 days now. I thought from that meeting, and there are many people on the north side who've said, what the hell happened to the meeting? Because it got posted. Again, I've been asking, what happened? Over and over again, that when things get canceled, they should put down the date it was canceled and the reason it was canceled. And I don't see why it takes a brain surgeon to figure out how to do that. And you've got your north side residents who are saying, why was it canceled? When was it canceled? And when is it going to be rescheduled? So I hope when we finally get another city manager, we can get this fixed, because there's no reason it can't be fixed. That's one big issue. Your north side residents are saying, you were going to talk to us, but we don't matter now? So you're destroying your own credibility, which I really hate to see happening, because we had so much positive things going, and here we have a problem and they're not being asked for their input again. So you set a level of expectations and then didn't deliver on it, despite having it in the record that the next step was to meet with the residents. So I'm as perplexed too. I don't know what happened to that. Anyways, I'm going to go back to my favorite things. Where's my signal light at Cronin? We don't
That
even have
wouldn't
a
be for
traffic
this
engineer.
meeting. That wouldn't be for this
Okay.
Stadium Authority meeting.
But for this meeting, as applies to all meetings, I hope that we can finally get either the city clerk or the city manager or someone takes issue and records the questions that are asked by the public. I believe it should be the same as asking a question under public records request. It should be answered. The requests do not have to be in writing. So when we make questions and ask for information, those should be captured and responded to. That's not being done. Does our city not have enough litigation to handle? It's getting to be rather disgusting, and sorry, but it's reached that level, that the public is not getting from staff and y'all what we need. Where are we supposed to ask those questions? Who are we supposed to ask them to? Who's supposed to provide those answers? Other cities do it. I thought this was the center of what's possible. I guess it's what's possible if it's important to you all. Because if it's important to us, we don't even get on the radar. The next thing I'd like to bring up is an emergency plan. In light of all the problems that happened everywhere, if we have one, where is it? And if we don't, we need to get off our tookuses and start coming up with one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other public presentations? Okay, seeing none, bills and claims and progress payments. Motion to pay the bills. Motion to pay the bills. Is there a second? Second. All right, any comments or questions on the bills?
Where does a member of the public see all the backup for those bills?
Is that the one question? Are you finished? Because I'll then have them answer.
Okay, I would like to know where the backup is to that. And does that backup include the original document? Who signed them off? Who authorized? How much is on it? How much was authorized to spend and how much is remaining? And when can we have that information online, readily available for everybody to see? Thank you.
Executive Director.
So maybe I can ask Director of Finance to come up, but it should be online, and it's in it's in Finance Department. Yeah. So
I mean, just
Angie.
the summary, I mean, not all the backup.
The summary's online. There's no backup, and I'm afraid some of this may not have backup. So,
So
Angie.
all of these we would have invoices for, because these are invoices that the Stadium Authority has paid. So if anybody from the public wants to see a specific one, we can actually provide the backup.
Who would they contact?
And they could contact the finance or the city clerk usually, because I think it would be a public records request, because we don't really put the city has so many invoices that we pay, so we are following that same standard.
So a public records request to the city clerk.
Yeah, and then we could provide them for the backup.
Get that documentation.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that. All right. So there's a motion and a second for bills and claims, and that passes unanimously. Next, we have new business. We have, first is the Audit Committee minutes of August 28, 2017. Their recommendation to accept the audited Santa Clara Stadium Authority financial statement. So we're just moving on the minutes. Is there a motion on the minutes? Motion to approve. And a motion and a second. Any discussion on just the minutes? All right, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, next we have the acting treasurer for the Stadium Authority recommendation to note and file the audited Santa Clara Stadium Authority financial statements for fiscal year ending March 31st, 2017, as recommended by the Audit Committee. Executive Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Stadium Authority engaged the services of KPMG to do the annual financial auditing of the stadium finances. And Lisa Avis, who's the Managing Director of KPMG, and also Kyle Slumpf, who's the Senior Manager. They're both here. And we have a brief presentation from them. They'll walk us through as to what they look for. And it's not like every statement or every financial document is looked at, but there's a modeling process and the recommendation that they came up with and what kind of grade they gave us. So Lisa can walk us through. And after that, Angie Kretsch, Acting Director of Finance, she has a brief presentation also on some of the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
Lisa and Kyle. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for your time today. As our city manager here stated, we did complete our audit of the Stadium Authority's financial statements as of March 31st, 2017. We received full cooperation from Stadium Authority personnel. We've also issued our opinion on these financial statements, and this was an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on the financial statements. We've also issued our report on internal controls and compliance, which is required under government auditing standards, and we issued a debt compliance letter as required under the authority's debt agreements. And those reports are in your meeting materials, and we had no findings or exceptions noted in any of the 3 reports that we've issued. As stated, we met with the Audit Committee on the 28th to discuss the audit results and the required communications in connection with the audit. That discussion included the purpose of the audit, the responsibilities of authority management as it relates to the Audit Committee, and the auditors. The accounting policies that were noted throughout the report are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and they are consistent with industry practices that we've seen in other similar engagements. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, who will just briefly run through the areas of emphasis during the audit.
Good evening. As Lisa mentioned, a couple of the areas of emphasis during our audit, we take a look at the financial statements as a whole and do risk assessment scoping and look into certain key areas, a couple of which are revenues and expenses, during which we selected samples of the revenue and expenses and agreed to third-party support. Another area of emphasis was debt. We obtained the debt roll forward and confirmed debt terms and balances outstanding. Another area was the accounts receivable and unearned revenue. We traced a sample of the items to cash collected in the SBL contracts. During our test work over the unearned revenue, Stadium Authority Management informed us of a change, correction in the amortization period over the owner SBLs from 40 years to 20 years. This resulted in an accounting misstatement due to the unearned revenue that should have been recorded in the past 2 years. It was an immaterial amount. Sure. Another area of emphasis was the capitalized stadium costs. We obtained the stadium cost roll forward and tested for additions if material. Another area of emphasis was over the project structure, where we updated our understanding of the project documents and agreements and summarized the terms.
Thank you. As part of our communications with the Audit Committee, we also confirmed that we are independent of the authority. There were no additional subsequent events that were noted, and there were no other issues to note requiring communication to the Audit Committee. We also reminded the Audit Committee and Authority Management that in 2021, the FASB, who's the governing body for the accounting standards, is coming up with they've issued a new standard over accounting for leases. And so we'll be working with the Authority Management on the adoption of that accounting principle over the next few years here. With that, we wanted to see if there were any questions just on the audit portion before we turn it over to the rundown of the financial statements.
Are there questions on their presentation so far? Or I'm sure there's questions on the financial statement, so.
Okay.
Are you not going to go through those? Angie's going through?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So Angie, did you prepare who prepared the financial statement?
So we prepare all the numbers for them and put them together. So it's kind of a combination. We go back and forth,
Okay.
but it's our numbers.
Okay. So you give them all the numbers? And
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And we prepare the MD&A, which is the management and discussion and analysis, and then the notes we also prepared, but they just reviewed them. No, the other PowerPoint. So what we're getting switched over on that, I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit about how the statements are set up. We have as I mentioned, the management discussion and analysis, and that's an overview that management provides over the entire report. It's one that I usually suggest that people read because it's easier than trying to read through the whole statements. It gives a summary of each of the actions that are the items in the report. And then we have the statement of net position, and a lot of you may be more familiar of the terminology balance sheet. And so that shows you assets and liabilities. Assets are what we are what we own, and then liabilities are what we owe. And then you have the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position. And again, that's the income statement that people are more familiar with. And then we have the statement of cash flows and the notes to the financial statements that provide a little bit more detail. So on that, I'll get started. So KPMG did talk about some of this. The audit report, it covers the 2016-17 fiscal year with comparative data from the 15-16 fiscal year. And the KPMG completed the annual audit and presented it to the audit committee on August 28th. And we did receive an unmodified or clean opinion, which is very good. That's what you want. And this report is also available on the Stadium Authority's webpage, or will be available after this meeting. Some key financial highlights. The value of Levi's Stadium, net of depreciation, is $781 million. There were 10 NFL games and 18 ticketed non-NFL games, and 126 special events were held at Levi's Stadium. The Stadium Authority recognized $106.6 million in operating revenue and $83.2 million in operating expenses for an operating income of $23.4. And I do want to mention that even though these are all together combined, you've seen these in quarters when I present the quarterly report to you. So you've seen a lot of these numbers. They'll look familiar. Non-NFL events generated $5.3 million in net revenue, and this is something that I believe I presented to you last quarter when I did my quarterly report. One thing that you have been wanting to see more of, and this is the total revenues of the non-NFL events. It's broken out at $52.2 million, and the total expenses were $46.9 million. Total debt service payments were $60.4 million. And the final cost allocation was recorded to move $24 million in tenant improvement costs from the Stadium Authority to Stadco. And again, this is what I was kind of explaining with the assets and liabilities. The assets are what we own. That equaled $869.7 million, and total liabilities equaled $837.7 million, with a total net position equaling $32 million, and this is an increase of $13.3 million. On the long-term debt statement, as you can see, we started we ended March 31st, 2016 at $464.7 million in debt, and now we have $429.8 million remaining. Just wanted to quickly cover what has went to the city based on these financial statements, and that's $3.4 million, performance rent of $2.5, ground rent of $250,000, senior and youth fees $229,562, and then parking fees are related to the Tasman parking lots $25,610. So that completes my report, and I'll be available to answer any questions.
Authority Member O'Neill.
Thank you very much for the report, Angie. So I just kind of highlighted some statements, and I agree with you, reading kind of that financial highlights page can be very helpful. So I did notice in the last bullet, talked about, the costs that were recovered. It says, this is in relation to Stadium Authority's 16-17 fiscal year activities. Additionally, cities fully reimbursed for all of its public safety administration costs by either the Stadium Authority or the Stadco. So as you know, we've been having some controversy on some of this topic. And, like there was some confusion as to whether some of that cost actually went into the construction fund or whatever. So still the position is that either one way or the other, we don't think that anything got billed to the general fund, that it's somewhere, it may be, not in the most obvious location or something where it maybe not the most visible, but so that's the position that those costs are captured under the Stadium Authority.
That's correct. Anything that has, I think we came out with that CMD also clarifying, letting people know where to charge, and I think it's been a lot more efficient and effective. And so everyone that has charged to the stadium, we have billed either the city, the 49ers or Stadium Authority, and been reimbursed.
Okay, so those
even
are
I get confused. It's like
right,
which hat?
yeah. And I think we still have, not putting this on you. I think we still maybe have some confusion as to like some of the management time, what we're going to do about that. Sure. But okay, so hold on. So, and excuse some of my ignorance on this stuff. I always get kind of confused. So when I went down to page 4. So is the long-term unearned revenue, so I was kind of thinking back about some of the stuff that I had to go through in my prior job. Is that like saying, I just want to make sure I understand, is that like, I know like in the software industry where we had to do a lot of adjustments where we couldn't recognize revenues for software licenses all at once, we couldn't recognize revenue for support contracts, so is that a lot of SBL? Are we like recognizing revenue from SBLs over a lifetime of the stadium?
The 40 years, because that's what the SBL, I think it's 40 or it's 40. Okay, so the auditors have mentioned that some of the owner SBLs are 20 years. So some of those are at 20 years, and then the majority of them are amortized, I guess, over the 40 years. So we're recognizing that.
Okay, so say, even though these days buildings don't seem to matter to anybody after they're 20 years old, but say, so the expectation would be that, say, at year 40, all of that revenue would be recognized, and but do the people still hold that license?
I believe, I'm not as clear on the agreements, but I
Yeah.
believe that they can be resold. And that might be something that management company might, I'm not sure if
okay.
they can clarify, but I think that after that 40 years, okay, I'm getting the
Okay.
nod that yes.
Okay, so
They start
my
separate.
main point is I just wanted to make sure that that was meaning that the SBL revenue had to be recognized over a lifetime. It couldn't be recognized.
Again, yeah, correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
all right, so let me just flip through to my next. So also, one of the things that I was a little confused about when I was reading the report. So on a number of the pages, there was like fiscal year 2015-16 analysis and then 16-17 analysis. So this report, was that just as a way for us to compare, or was this really an audit of 2 different years?
No, it was just a comparison of, so
So
the
you could-
15-16 was audited in the previous year, and we're just, and this was a little different from what I've seen too, so I actually asked the same question because it seemed, at first I got a little lost because I thought we were repeating ourselves.
Yeah.
But we're just giving you a comparison of what the difference was in the previous year.
Okay, so one of the things that caught my eye on page 5 is when I was reading those 2 paragraphs, and it talks about capital assets being decreased. And so in 15-16, because first of all, to put it in context, it talks about the allocation true-up. And this is something that I've been interested in for several years, and we had like a study of, like, we were going to go back and really look at all the construction costs, and the cost allocation study was how it was being referred to. And I know that that was one of the things that a few of us were interested in seeing. So I thought that had been done like at least a couple years ago. So then when I saw for 15-16, the assets decreased by about $40 million due to a small amount of current period construction activity, which I wasn't sure what that was. And then so offset by entire year depreciation, as well as an allocation true-up of transfer construction-related tenant improvements from State Authority to Stadco. And then this year, we then had another, so this time we had a decrease of 13.6 million due to a small amount of current construction activity. Once again, I wasn't sure what that was. And then another cost allocation transfer construction-related costs. So when I thought that all of the cost allocations had been done like a couple years ago, so I was just confused. So it looked like there was ongoing cost. Is that based on whatever the small construction activity? I'm not sure what that is.
So what I understand from what I understand that happened is in 15-16, the auditors asked us to record an estimate of what that, so they had a good estimate of what that final number was going to be. It's my understanding that it was actually, the cost allocation was finally completed, I believe in 2016, I can't remember. And so that caused that true up.
Okay, so there was maybe,
So
there's been a couple of estimates, and so are we now, we think we're done? Because as we go through time, they were going to need to do modifications, like there's been some information out there in the press about possibly putting some kind of sunshade or something over the, so there's going to be additional, new construction costs, but do we think we now have the allocations completed?
The cost allocation for the construction has been completed, yes.
Okay, so those, reports are available somewhere, then, okay, so
Well,
that's,
and I just wanted to mention too, I think the city manager and I discussed possibly putting that on one of the future agendas and having that KPMG represent, this team did not do that. This team just did the audit. That cost allocation is very specialized, to see if we could have someone that actually did the audit actually come and do a presentation, and especially with the new stadium officer and a new city manager coming on board. And then I wasn't here during this too, and I would be interested in knowing how they went through it and actually, have them present it to us and walk us through how it was done. Even if they could give us some examples and.
I think that'll be a good future study session for this board.
Yeah, we've been asking for that for at least 2 years.
yeah.
Yeah, we've never seen the cost allocation study.
So I have reached out.
And I just want
so-
to, can I just ask a question on that since you're on cost allocation? It says here on page 16 that the finalized cost allocation was during the year March 31st, 2017, but I thought it ended several years ago, and that there was changes and movements of assets and money and different things, but we never were aware of any of that on any Stadium Authority agenda for this last fiscal year. So I thought it was done in like 14 or 15, but it says there's still movement up until this last fiscal year. So maybe we could get a cost allocation, the actual study, which we've never seen, the breakdown, and where all these movements are going, because in the Harvey Rose audit, there's a lot of movement of money that the Stadium Authority Board has never seen, like hundreds of millions of dollars moved around. So what is this cost allocation study? And it seems to go on for years. All right, sorry, Teresa.
So then, next, looking at page 6, in the 16-17 analysis paragraph. So, we see there that we have a substantial drop in revenues in the fiscal year 17 and a commensurate drop in expenses. And so when I was looking in the paragraph where it talked about operations, kind of goes through the numbers of like the 37 million due to decrease in non-NFL event expenses. And then it describes the other decreases in expenses. And then he says these decreases were partially offset by increases in discretionary expense, capital improvement expense, Stadium Authority, general and administrative expenses. Well, yes, so there isn't any other detail there as to what those were. So in your, your staff's analysis, did it look like there was, those numbers were still kind of in a ratio that was important? Didn't it happen, since we don't have any of that detail here, that there wasn't anything in any of those categories that was out of, what would be normally expected?
Right. Again, as I had mentioned, so you have seen these numbers more in better detail in a quarterly reports. The financials don't break it down to that level. But the big decrease is that we had less non-NFL events in 16-17 than we did in 15-16. We had all the COPA events in 15-16, so that was a lot more revenue that came in, and when you're doing a comparison of 15-16 to 16-17. And then on the expenditures, like I said, we provide those numbers, and KPMG audits those, and they're the same numbers that we provide to you each quarter.
Okay, all right. So then, I had just a couple more questions. On page 10, when we were looking at the operating revenues, the charges for services, is that all the, that's all the Manco, whatever the costs for them, that's all the Manco costs? Does that include any other costs in there for services?
So charges for.
Because it went from like approximately 101 million to 63 million. It's on page 10.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if I have a breakdown, because I asked for, to see what's in each one of those categories.
Because that was a fairly substantial drop, so wasn't sure if that was like commensurate with less need for Manco services because we had less non-NFL events.
So charges for services on the Stadium Authority side is a revenue, so that's the NFL ticket surcharge, the senior and
Okay.
youth fees, the fan walk brick revenue, non-NFL event revenue, and then the non-NFL ticket surcharge.
Okay, so that's, all right, so that
So
makes
it's
it.
a revenue, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I know, it can be confusing, because you would think that it's.
Pretty substantial, okay. So then, on page 11, the statement of cash flow, the contribution from the successor agency in 16, was that like, that was the payout from the, kind of the remaining obligation from the RDA?
Yes,
Okay.
that would have been on the ROPS, I believe, the last payment.
Okay, investing. So when I see net cash provided by investing, I guess we're just not having a lot of this money sitting in cash. We've got it in short-term investment
Yeah,
vehicles.
a lot of this is the interest that we earn on the SBLs.
Okay.
That 8.5%, and then a small part of it's bank interest, so yeah, it's not.
Okay, so I wasn't sure whether we had it in some kind of short notes or something like that. Let me see if I had anything else highlighted. Okay, that's the same thing, cost allocation, construction period. So some of this stuff, I still have some questions, but I don't think tonight we can get into it about the construction audits. More true up stuff, okay. Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Authority Member Davis.
Angie, there was an article in Forbes today that said that the operating costs for the stadium is 130 million. How come we have 106?
Don't know
Nice
where-
little article in Forbes magazine.
Did they get our financials?
I don't know what they got, but they said that they have $130 million in operating costs, and that they were the 5th largest NFL team for money. And so I'm just curious why we have this 106 and they have 130.
Well, the 106 is revenue, so they would be way off if.
But it says operating costs. It says the Stadium Authority recognized 106 million in operating revenues. So that would be costs, right?
No, it's revenue.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The cost would be the
Oh,
expenses.
I'm sorry, debit credit. Okay, go ahead. Take that away from me again. Okay, so that's why, yeah, this says operating.
So I'm not sure
it's-
what they were using to base
Okay,
that on.
look it up, it's in Forbes magazine. Tell me,
will.
give me the answer. Okay.
will.
And then on page 9, there's something in here that says construction in progress for 79,000. What are they doing in 2017?
So I believe when we say construction, it's probably the CIP, but yeah, so it's the water treatment that we're doing and the LED lighting projects.
What's the water treatment?
That I'm not really sure if you want, that we can
Is that the
ask.
grass? Is that the grass?
These are all the capital expenditure projects you approved months ago.
What are we doing with the
What are
water?
we doing with the money? I forget, I'm sorry. I was wondering if it was the field and if you were having problems or, okay,
Those are the projects that we put in front of you as a capital expenditure project,
okay.
and I'm not quite sure what the question is.
She said water treatment. I don't, what is water treatment? Are you upgrading? What are
Can
you
we
upgrading?
provide the detail to you
We should
on that?
Let me
Okay,
put it all
okay.
together
Yeah.
for you so you can look at it again.
Okay, so it's 79,000. Okay, that was just one of those questions. And what was the other one? I had another one, sorry. On the agenda report, it said something about unmodified clean opinion was issued. And when I read this description, it says operating on fairly presented and financial statements are free of materials misstatements.
It's all good.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
From auditing perspective, it's good.
Okay, so this is
It's a-
just auditing
It's audit
lingo.
language, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Angie.
You're welcome.
And then my last question was about the SBLs. When it said that it was, the amortization was for 20 years instead of 40 years. And because I noticed that in the lease agreement, that in 20 years, into the 40 years, that we would no longer have the SBL income,
So,
correct?
so are you talking about the restatement that the auditors had mentioned?
Yeah, this one?
So, yeah, so that was, we did, we actually found that, I believe, the staff found that. all of the SBLs were at 40 years, so that's what we had been doing. And then staff noticed that there are some owner SBLs, the $250,000 seats, that we were also using the 40-year amortization on, and those should have been 20, because after 20 years, you're able to resell those again. So we went back and made that correction, and KPMG agreed with
Okay.
it, so.
Last question, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Authority Member Colston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not an accountant, but basically, $3 million in change went to the general fund as profit off of that stadium during the fiscal year.
That's correct.
That was all.
Thank you. Authority Member Watanabe.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, after being on the audit committee and going through the whole process, one thing that we did talk about was the Harvey Rose audit and how going forward as a result of the Harvey Rose audit, that there were recommendations that have been made as a result of that audit that will be incorporated in this audit going forward. So we'll see, what changes, if any, there will be as a result of that audit. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Caserta.
This is for either you, Angie, or Mr. Mercurio. Do we anticipate that non-NFL events will rise or dip, and what can we do to see that continue to be robust as the asset ages, et cetera, and, Oakland gets their act together maybe, et cetera, down the road? So I don't know if that's for you, Angie, or Mr. Mercurio.
I can see your eyes falling. He must be behind me, because I don't think I can answer that. I'll let him.
Oh, come on, Angie, I'm not that small. You can feel me. Look, we will always do everything we can to bring more events into the stadium. Dare I bring up the curfew issue as being an issue, though, that if we don't address it, you're not going to get them, plain and simple. So, especially as it relates to concerts, as it relates to others that don't require curfew issue, listen, that's what we're in the business to make money and make money for you and provide great services for people and to use this asset as the means to get great events into this city. So we'd love to continue to push forward and fight for that. We certainly could use your help in that regard, but we know there's other issues at stake, so.
And I brought this up before, and we had Super Bowl 50. I know Atlanta has a new stadium now, and they're in queue. Can you tell me when we would likely bid for a Super Bowl again?
I think it's probably somewhere in the next year to 16, 18 months, I would guess. It could be shorter than that, depending upon which one we kind of decide we want to collectively push forward to. And
So you're
there's a
looking
whole bunch
to-
of other things that might relate to, the status of what's happening around the stadium, related project, for example, those types of things that we want to take into consideration. But my guess is probably we would start putting together the bid, just like we did with a couple others just recently this past month. We put in a couple bids for some events that we're looking hopefully to be successful on. So it's a nonstop process of putting forward not just bids for Super Bowl, but for other types of bigger events that do come out here.
Thank you.
Okay.
No other questions? I think that's it for now, so I'm going to go to the public. Scott Lane. Scott Lane first. Oh, no, Scott? I will. Oh, okay. Deborah.
A couple of things. Number one, I hope we're finally going to address the grand jury requirement of not having our finance person being our stadium authority person, because that is in violation of what they said to do, and we've been ignoring that. I wonder how much longer we're going to ignore it. And every question I ask here, please consider it a public information request, and I would like all that information as a result of this public information request. So everything I ask is now a public information request, so please treat it that way. Thank you. I would like to know how much interest we've paid on these loans and to whom. The parking fees that's been paid to Tasman, I believe those monies were then all used to offset the costs of security. So we did not get any of that money. And I believe if you looked at Measure J, that's actually taking money away from the general fund. So I think that is a violation of Measure J. Also, where are the parking fees for using our garage? I didn't see that, and I know our garage gets used. This report shows we got $5.3 million. Where is that money? Where did it go? How did we use it? The answer is deafening. I want it verified that every single seat in there gets an SBL and all that SBL money is ours. Another thing, public information request, and while we're doing it, let's see a breakdown of how many seats and how much each seat was. I think a thing the public needs to know, because maybe they don't understand finance very well, but this audit really is garbage in, garbage out. It's not really an audit. They are verifying the numbers they got from our people are the numbers they got from our people. That's all they just did. They did not look at anything else. And for everybody to take and bite that hook and think we've got something, you're kidding yourself. We
Thank
didn't
you,
get
Debbie.
anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott? Good evening.
Good evening again. Glad to hear the honesty where a lot of people are confused by a lot of this. I personally have tried about 10 times to download the data. If it's there, I didn't see it. If it has a fine level of detail, I didn't see it. But let me try to re-clarify something else that I hear on the dais. You're trying to clarify things. What I was trying to say earlier in my public comment, bear with me, is it is the jurisdictional authority of this body before the Coldplay concert to come up with a penalty if the curfew is violated. That's what I was trying to say. The north side issue is part of the issue, but the other side, that's a long-term issue, because once you change this, you change the EIR. What I was trying to say was this body, what I requested last week, was that you discuss what a penalty would be for breaking the curfew that would be so onerous, yet legally that you can back up, that they wouldn't want to violate the curfew. $1,000 to the stadium, that's ridiculous, that's, as we all know. So that's what I'm trying to clarify. So if that wasn't clear in my 3 minutes, my apologies. There are two separate and distinct issues. Going forward, what's a long-term process? The short-term is just make sure it doesn't get broken before. In Napa, when they said they would not violate the curfew, they pulled the plug. That's what I'm suggesting they do. If the Levi Stadium management does not pull the plug, they're violating what the City Council and Stadium Authority want. With regard to this, let me talk more specifically. Yeah, it is GIGO, but it's really is, are we seeing all the numbers? Is KPMG seeing all the numbers? If there's any numbers that they're not seeing, the audit means nothing. It is, if you have to get all the numbers. And also, once again, let's go back. This was supposed to be 150 million, not 850 million for the original Measure J. And let's talk net costs. It doesn't matter that the stadium gets us $5 million. What matters is, we'll look at the cost that is, the net cost. Office R&D and hotel would have given us far more. So let's look at the numbers, the details under the numbers.
Thank you. Any other members? Any other cards, Rob? No. All right. So before us, we have the audit, and I think that we all understand what the audit is. It's taking our quarterly reports, making sure the numbers add up, and I mean, I think the real issues we have are the 37 findings and recommendations from the Harvey Rose audit that we're going to work on our audit committee on, which may probably affect this type of audit from years to come. We're going to have to get that fixed. We're going to have to redo some budgets, especially public safety, and put all what the real numbers are, and redo the budgets from the last couple of years, so we actually have an idea of what we're spending and what, how much money the non-NFL side is funding for the NFL side, because we don't have a true picture of that. We'll have to look at things like, insurance bills. We'll have to be able to make sure that we can independently verify how many tickets are sold, and if we're actually getting the numbers for all of those things. They're not going to happen with this audit, but we are going to start meeting very regularly with our Stadium Authority Audit Committee to work on those 37 findings and recommendations. Discussion of the curfew violations and what the options are, I think, are going to take place the 26th on next Tuesday, because this board cannot change ordinances or anything at this point. So is there any other comments or questions on this audit? And is there a motion to note and file it? Motion second to note and file the audit. And that passes unanimously. All right, next we have reports of Stadium Authority members and special Stadium Authority committees. Is there anybody on the dais? Nope, seeing none. Executive Director reports. Executive Director.
No, Madam Chair, I was just going to mention the schedule of meetings, but we've already talked about that.
Okay,
The community meetings, yes.
okay, very good. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion second to adjourn. Lights on the motion, and that passes unanimously. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.